I painted this dreamy creek landscape with watercolor as this more realistic landscape, but I printed the latter with a Gelli plate. Watch me create these two. Hello and welcome to the third part of my watercolor on gel plate sessions. As before, I will create one landscape directly on watercolor paper and afterwards print one from the gel plate. Here you see the Hahnemühle watercolor selection block, which has 4 different watercolor paper examples, and I choose Britannia 300 GSM hot pressed. I tape it down with my favorite tape, the 3M micropore surgical tape, cutting it in half to not waste so much tape. I then cover the surface of the paper with a transparent gesso. As this will seal the surface a little, repels the watercolor paint, and I can work with it longer. But first I urgently have to talk about my shop. Some of you may have noticed that the link from YouTube to Shopify leads to false results. If you click directly on a print, it is possible you get connected with the wrong Shopify product. It took me weeks and has been quite unnerving to find out with Shopify and YouTube where the problem was. I think it is working now, but if that happens to you, just go to my shop directly under tinas-art.com. There you will definitely get the right infos. Come on over and have a look. You can switch the language in my shop to German, English, French or Spanish. And I'm selling originals as well as high quality prints. So back to the watercolors. I am using the Schmincke Horadam in Glacier Green, which is a highly granulating paint, and the Van Gogh Raw Umber. I want to mix both colors with the granulating medium by Winsor & Newton, and so I'm taking the watercolor paint directly out of the tube and then mix it not with water, but only with the granulating medium. That is important if you work with that medium. So it's better to have watercolor in a tube for this. So on the left you see the raw umber, and there I still had some left in there. I'm mixing the Horadam, which was already highly granulating, and I want to enhance that even. So both colors are pretty dry, as you don't have the water in it, so you have to work rather quickly. So I'm spreading the green out and then adding, with a pipette, I'm adding more of the granulation medium and then let it run over the paint. That gives very interesting effects. And now I'm doing the same thing with the raw umber. For this paint I am using even more of the granulating medium. I'm using a lot here, and the stuff is expensive. But what the hell, it's for art. Now I'm employing some acrylic ink, which is always a very interesting reaction with the watercolor, and I'm spraying and sprinkling it on outside of the granulating river, flowing rivers there, and inside. And yeah, the whole stuff is flowing around and I'm just pouring paint. And yeah, just basically making a big mess here, which is so much fun. And I thought I'll try the Distress Iron Oxide paint with it. It's a paint by Ranger. I really didn't plan on using all these different mediums, but it's so interesting what the granulation medium makes of all of them, and that I just had to go with it. I also have a granulating medium in a water spray bottle, in a medium spray bottle, and I spray even more of it on to all this mixed paint. And even more acrylic ink. This one has a pipette by itself, and first I'm only using it for a moon, trying to giving it a round shape with a brush. And it's too dark, so I'm sprinkling on some of the white ink and even more of the white ink, also mixed with some granulation medium. And note what I'm doing here. I'm squeezing out the paint or the medium in the pipette and then holding it in the puddle of paint there and sucking it up by letting it, by releasing it again, if you know what I mean. And it also leaves a very nice granulation pattern here. I want some other areas to be that dark, so I'm trading it with the same sepia ink that I use for the moon, just to have it dark in some other places as well. And some of the white ink again. You really have to know when to stop here, because otherwise you'll just have a blob of some muddy color that you never wanted. So if you like it, just stop it flowing, and you can pick some of the very wet paint up with a tissue, what I'm doing here, so that it doesn't mingle too long and stays halfway how you made it there. And just when I said you have to know when to stop, I'm spraying on even more granulation spray. Yeah, maybe I should practice what I preach. So I very nearly ruined it. No, but it's okay. I'm taking quite a bit off here, and note that I'm making with the tissue, I'm even making some, giving some texture to these wet parts with the different inks and watercolors. And while the paint is still wet in some areas, I'm creating some grasses with the other end of the pencil brush. So I'm letting this one dry, and now going on to the watercolor painting I want to do with the gel plate and on the gel plate. For that, I'm cutting some watercolor paper. I'll show you here how you can have a ragged edge. You just fold it over and then wet the crease a little bit, just with water, and then you tear it. Important advice for when you work on the gel plate with the watercolor or the like. You roll out some dishwashing liquid, as I've done here. You cannot see it as it's transparent, but you can see it's shiny. And because normally with watercolor you will just get beads, and you know the gel plate will resist, and that's very interesting too. But here I want to have a real spread out watercolor. I think any ordinary dishwashing soap or liquid will do. Probably not the soap, a liquid. I have pre-mixed my two colors, and this time only with water, as I'm adding the granulating spray later. So as you can see, there's a little bit of beading. Well, that's fine, but it's not, yeah, well, it's good to spread out on the dishwashing liquid. Spraying on the granulating spray and let it sit for a bit. Now I'm also here, I'm coming in with a white ink, and letting all that flow a little. Not as much this time though. From time to time you may think I hear a dog snoring, and that's what you're hearing. Similar flowing of the paints, but I have mixed the raw umber with the Glacier green, so it will be quite different. And also the gel plate will be adding its own typical look. That's what I'm doing this for. So I'm placing on that torn watercolor paper, and I'm very sorry I forgot which brand I used, but it must be a heavy one, 300 GSM. And here you see the result, and I am absolutely stunned. I absolutely love this. It looks like a moor landscape, doesn't it? Even with a little bit of fog down there. And here you can see all the interesting granulating things that the paint made there. But I can hardly see any granulation on the brown, on the raw umber. So the Glacier green is heavily granulating by itself. And while this raw beauty is drying, I'm gonna work out the other prints. So this is kind of a crazy and dreamlike landscape. And I could have shown it the other way around with the blue standing for the sky, and then you see the trees the other way around. But so for some reason I didn't want that. And although it's very peculiar with the trees that have their roots going over the creek, I like that idea. Note that I'm heating up the tape before I take it off. Normally the tape, this 3M tape doesn't hurt the paper, but you never know, and I'm always careful. This is a Rosemary brush that is quite expensive. It's a little stiff and short with short bristles, and it's taking off paint when you wet it just a little bit. It's taking off the paint really well, but you don't have to buy such an expensive pencil for that. There are makeup pencils that are just like that are like under €5, and they work fine. So I'm also creating some highlights on the tree trunks here by taking paint off with the eradicator. And now I'm coming in with the pencils as usual and working on that neat little moon. And just basically giving hints on to have order in that paint chaos, creating shadows. I see quite a lot of different kinds of bark here. And no, I'm not talking about my dogs. I'm talking about tree barks. And I really don't know what that line is back there. It's a kind of a horizon line, like maybe the foliage line, foliage end or whatever, I don't know. I'm just following what the paint gives me as usual. And the grasses I erased, I'm giving them some shadows too. The eye is always trying to find a solution when it sees something chaotic and compared to images that it knows. And in this case, you have the roots of the trees growing up high over the earth, and the trees themselves starting a bit later, if you know what I mean. And so I'm just, treating them as roots in the open and giving them shadows as well. They're probably tropical strangler figs. I don't know if you know these types. They grow over a tree, and in the end they strangle that tree to death, and the tree within dies, and the strangler fig stays like that, and you see those open roots patterns, which are very interesting. It's kind of morbid, isn't it? Here you see me working with an X-Acto knife on the grasses because I want some more patterns there, some more weeds there, and I'm actually working with the other end of the sharp blade of the X-Acto knife. I don't know how to describe it better. So it has these little nice grassy feel to it. So I'm leaving it like this. I think it turned out real nice. And now I'll be working out this one, the jelly print. You can, of course, leave it like this if you're into abstract landscapes, but you know me, I want to work this one out and make a definite more landscape. The most interesting part, I think, is this one down here, where the white ink reacted with the granulation medium and also with the already granulated green paint. Up here, there's some more interesting things. And as they are more in the background, I'm not gonna give them as much detail as I put in the foreground. So it gets a more physical 3D look. I'm starting with a color pencil in the color Nougat by the Polychroma's color range. It's a color I use very often, and it's not too dark and not too light, so it blends in well with the green and the umber. You can see these are bushes, and the granulation even gave me some mini trunks under them. So as usual, I'm just placing shadows and highlights. And as this looks like ice a little, this could very well be a winter landscape with the bushes being frozen over. The paint-free areas in this print look like water to me, so I'm also making some reflections here. I'm going to work them out a little more later. And I'm also adding grasses with a white pencil. And I want to show you another technique to put in some grasses, and that would be with a pencil that you saw me do also in the other painting. Not with a pencil, sorry, with a brush. So I have a rather soft one and a very stiff one, which is actually I was about to throw away. So the soft one does not work so well. It's okay, but it's a little too faint. And now I'm trying out the stiff brush, and that's not working either. So the eradicator or something similar would be the best for this, but actually I forgot where I put it. I can't find it. So I'm using the white colored pencil again, also to increase the highlights on the bushes. And people have asked me actually a few times about this white Caran d'Ache pencil, and I can just confirm this is the best white pencil you can have. The Caran d'Ache luminance white. And now I'm actually coming in with watercolor pencils. I have a darker blue and I just give a hint of blue water there and then spread it out with the brush. And this is a brown watercolor pencil. And I'm just making some stripes to dilute them and pull them downwards. You don't have to do that. It depends. If you don't dilute them at all, you can do it with a regular pencil as well, then that water would be completely still and flat. And if you push it down a little bit, it looks like the water is stirred a little. I hope you know what I mean, again. And you see here that it's not winter time because there are some white flowers. Or maybe they are winter flowers. And for more highlighting, I'm using my beloved fabric marker and also a Gelli roll fine liner in white. The fine liner, everything I did before with a white Caran d'Ache pencil, I'm just adding more white, more highlights to the highlights, on top of the highlights, so to speak. I do that very often, that I start very subtle with a color pencil and then switch to fine liners. But only for the highlights here, not for the dark parts. You can see the fabric marker is, I just love that. You can, as soon as you've put the mark, you can spread it out with your finger. I see an offer for some rocks there, so I'm giving them a highlighted side. And remember, not too detailed if you don't want them to come too much in the foreground. And you see this little thing? It's supposed to be a flower, but it looks man-made. So I guess it's a security camera. Some more detailed shadows in the foreground. I've switched to the regular colored pencils again. And then something disturbed me. It was the river bank, the darkest shadow down there was too thin, because also the dark shadows just before the water, they get reflected too. So you have to make that dark part a little broader. And I'm showing you the water effects here again. I'm not showing you everything because this one took me ages. So you see how I dilute the watercolor pencils and add the blue. And also water in the background should be lighter than the water in the foreground. In the background here, there is more interesting granulation going on, but I don't do more work on that part, as it is better to leave things in the background more blurry and not detailed. I actually had the idea of putting some animals by photo transfer or sketch in, but then decided otherwise. It's just going to be a moor landscape. If you're asking yourself what was the Gelli Plate for, my answer after 3 episodes of this test session is basically for the beading and the resist that the gel plate, together with the dishwashing detergent, gave you. Gosh, I need a break from watercolor now. I love it, but that was a little too much the past weeks. Next, I will do something traditional again. Some photo transfers and prints with a medium you might not have thought about yet. See you next week. Bye!